You smell that?
Nature's most powerful aphrodisiac.
Leaving right after this drink. Rock and roll, whiskey, and other stories. With your host, Brian Shaw.
Cheers. And welcome to episode 14 of I'm Leaving Right After This Drink, Rock and Roll, Whiskey, and Other Stories. Now, before we get into episode 14, I think I need to kind of just say that I'm a lucky son of a bitch. After, I say surviving, but after making it through 2 hurricanes back-to-back unscathed, I consider myself one of the luckiest fucking guys in the state of Florida, and definitely in, the Southeast and the East Coast after all the shit that has happened over the last few weeks. So now that we're through that, hopefully hurricane season is officially over for us, even though it really doesn't end until the end of November. But we're going to say we made it through and all is good. So now as we get into episode 14, some of you may be going, who the fuck are you? Why do I listen to you? Who cares? Maybe you stumbled on me, whatever. Well, you know what? Just a guy from a small town in Illinois who worked in the entertainment industry for about 20 years or so, and worked in radio and TV, and got to meet a lot of fucking cool people along the way, and got to meet a few assholes along the way also. And so this podcast is not just necessarily about the cool dudes. There's also stories about some assholes. I don't think I've told any stories really. Like episode 2, I think, was about the bass player and the Bullet Boys. He wasn't really an asshole. He was just kind of a cocky son of a bitch, and whatnot. So it's just kind of just stories, man. Just talking about my life, whether it's from the entertainment business. Maybe it's something I did last weekend if I went and saw a concert or whatever. And you know what? Just drinking some fucking Jack Daniels and telling you a fucking story about some shit that happened in my life. So I appreciate you tuning in. And hey, make sure you hit the subscribe button there on the fucking page. That would be awesome. And as we get into episode 14, tonight I'm going to talk about MFNRocks.com. Music for the net. Now, this was our internet radio station that we launched October 1st of 1999. 25 years ago, we attempted, and I say attempted, but we were successful at it, and I'll kind of lead into this. This may take me a couple of podcasts because I don't want to make this one long one kind of talking about, that's what she said. We don't want to talk about this through the whole time and go a long time with that. But so I'll kind of get into it. And if I run a little long, then I'll just continue it into, episode 15, because there's a lot to talk about with MFNRocks.com, as we were one of the first, if not the first, internet radio station to stream 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, audio and video at the time. Now we're talking 1999. Streaming was still obviously in its fucking super infancy, and this is like when you could like tune in, and you could tune into some different radio stations or different things on the internet and listen, but and if they had video, it was just kind of like a frame that you'd see every few seconds or whatever. But we actually had streaming video at the time, and so it was very crazy. It was in its infancy. We're talking 1999. We're still talking connecting to a modem at like 56K. We're not talking cable modems and T1 lines and all this fucking high fucking crazy shit going on yet. So this was quite a thing to take on as we jumped into this, and it kind of started just on a whim. I had been let go from the radio gig I was at in Virginia, and I ended up out in Los Angeles, as my brother Steve was kind enough to let me crash on his couch for a little bit while I got my bearings and kind of figured out what the fuck I was going to try and do when I moved to Los Angeles on a whopping $75 a week on unemployment. So again, 1999. And even then, of course, $75 was zero to live on in California. So luckily I had a place to fucking stay. Anyway, let's get back to fucking important shit here. And I went on some crazy little fucking job ad or interview or something that I had seen for like this broadcasting school that was in Hollywood. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll go check it out. And, maybe it leads to something. Who really knows? And so I sat in there for, an hour or a couple hours. And it didn't seem like they were like helping their students or whatever get jobs like at real radio stations. It seems like they were pushing people out to the internet. And still, again, I'm not even really thinking like, oh, that's cool or anything. I'm just kind of like, wow, they're pushing them to the internet. Like, what the hell? That's kind of different. And so I went home, and because it really wasn't for me, because I had already kind of been through all that. I'd already been working in the industry for a few years. And, I get home, my brother's like, hey, how'd it go? And I was like, it's all right. I go, the interesting thing is like they're pushing their students or whatever out to the internet. And I said, that'd be kind of interesting to have like an internet radio station or something, And that was kind of the conversation. Like it just kind of died, and that was the end of it. And then the next day, he comes home from work and he's like, let's do it. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Let's do what? Let's do the fucking internet radio station. Let's figure it out. And let's try it. Let's give it a fucking shot. And this is, of course, of the time. It's kind of, the internet is in its infancy. It's booming. There's a lot of obviously tech companies that are going. Google was still not Google yet. You know what I'm saying? Like all this shit was in its infancy at this time. And so it was kind of crazy. And so we started doing our research. I happened to be friends with a guy at the time who was on KNAC.com. And they were, of course, a big FM dial station back in the day. And they eventually got bought out. Corporate radio pushed them out, and nobody wanted to play that kind of music anymore. But KNAC, obviously a very famous radio station, for being one of those stations that kind of helped put Metallica on the map. If I'm not mistaken, they might have been the first radio station to ever play Metallica. But I ended up meeting this guy for lunch quite a few times over the, of course, the few months that I had been living out there at that time. And I just started kind of picking his brain about how they did it. And he's like, it's this, we plug it into here, boom, 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 it goes, and it's on the internet, that dang old internet, man, you know what I'm saying? And so it was pretty simple. And I was like, wow, it's that easy. And so, my brother started talking, and, my brother Steve's a hell of a networker. And somehow he managed to find this company in Montana that was a streaming company out of Montana with The Real Player. Anybody remember The Real Player? Like this fucking certainly doesn't exist now. It almost makes you wonder, like, what the fuck ever happened to this company? But so they and they ended up partnering with us to make a long, excuse me, whoo, gotta love some Jack Daniels. It's we ended up partnering with them, which was a great thing because bandwidth at the time was going to cost us a fucking small fortune. And we knew that by broadcasting audio and video every day, man, we were going to get into a lot of fucking money that we didn't fucking have. And, but we made it. We kind of partnered with these guys. We started, getting our feet wet with how are we going to build a website? Who's building our website? What are we going to do? And how do we staff it? And all these kind of things. And, I got friends that were out there that I met, and they wanted to volunteer and help us out. And so, we partnered with a lot of these guys, and, they all helped us get this thing off the ground. I had some record people that I was still friends with from my days in Virginia. You'd call some of these people, and you're like, hey man, can you guys do this? And they're like, nah, we can't do that. Like, we don't know what the fuck you're doing. Internet, like that's never going to fucking work. Like, what the fuck's the internet radio station? Like, nobody really knew, because again, this shit was still, in the very beginning stages of it. And there were definitely stations out there that were playing music and doing all that kind of thing, but kind of doing what we were doing was definitely different. And so, we went out and we started making it happen. And the more people that would tell me no, it's that typical story, right? The more people tell you no, the more people tell you it's never going to fucking work. It drives you that much more to go, I'll figure out a way to make it fucking work. And we did exactly that. And, I was able to, partner with a lot of cool people and get a lot of cool shit done. And finally, on October 1st of 1999, we finally launched MFNRocks.com. We probably did it to 2 fucking people. It was probably my brother sitting in the office and my friend Dave in Virginia. And my friend Dave in Virginia, he plays a big part of this because, again, we were just starting out. And this is like, internet marketing was certainly not what it is today. People had banner ads and all that kind of bullshit. So it was like, how do we get people? And our whole thing was, we're going to be grassroots. We're going to meet bands. We're going to bring bands into the station. And we were literally Joe Rogan before Joe Rogan was ever a fucking thing. So our whole plan was to bring bands in, actors, musicians, other people just like me and you, and hang out, play some cool music, have some drinks, talk about life, the whole deal. And which is exactly what we did. There's still some clips up on YouTube I believe my interview with Bruce Kulick is up there. I think my friends at Hair the Dog is another interview that's up there. There's definitely 3 or 4 videos up there to show you what we were doing at the time. And I know if you come across that video with Hair the Dog in it, man, it is fucking just beer bottles all across the table, because we definitely like to have a good time having some drinks when those guys came down. But again, October 1st, we launch and we're getting things going. And here we are, streaming to the fucking world. And I got 2 people probably listening, maybe 3 if I was lucky. And, we wanted to make it so where anybody could tune in. It wasn't just we wanted to be on the internet and we could cuss and we could do all this shit. It was really about making it somebody, that somebody who was 15 and somebody who was 50 could listen. That we weren't really trying to do like this whole demographic thing and do like a traditional radio type of thing. So it was extremely cool. I learned so much from this experience. You have no idea that I learned so much that even to this day, that experience plays into my career and has played into, my life for the last 25 years. And I will say this, we were live streaming audio and video for about 2 years. And then it became a music news site for a while and so on. But we fucking made it happen. And in those 2 years, man, we did a lot of shit. And we went from, like I said, those first couple of people listening to, by the time it wrapped up, about 250,000 unique visits a month. And we still were like, what the fuck do we do? Because nobody really knew what to do at that time with that kind of numbers. And so it was pretty fucking nuts. But in the meantime, when we launched, man, it was let's fucking go. And we were recording shows on a VCR. Yeah. Remember what a VCR is? That's what we were recording shows on. And when we couldn't have a live body in the studio, we'd put the fucking VCR tape in of a previous show, and we would just start it and move on and come back. And let me tell you, man, it was fucking hardcore for the first few weeks and even the first few months of coming in. I'd go live at 6 a.m, go till noon. If somebody couldn't come in, I'd go noon to 6 with a VCR tape, come back in, go live, stay live for another 6-7 hours and shit. Like, it was pretty fucking insane to kind of think about what we were doing. But in the meantime, tons of bands came in, got to do a lot of interviews on the station. I mean, interviews from Jesse Dupree from Jackal, Pepper Keenan from Corrosion of Conformity, David Draymond from Disturbed, Dennis DeYoung from Styx, Sebastian Bach. Man, I can't even think of the list of fucking people. Ryder Size from Nashville Pussy was on the show a few times. Paul O'Neill, the founder and stuff from the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Like, there were so many artists and bands that I was finally able to get in touch with and get them into the studio. Gary Hoey is still a great friend of mine. Of course, he's a phenomenal guitar player. And he would come in with his little band in a box and play right in front of me and do his Christmas songs or, his other songs. And man, it was a fun fucking time. Of course, strippers and porn stars and the whole fucking deal. And you know what, as much as we were trying not to be, like this, we're not appealing to this younger generation. Well, you know what? Well, we had to, have some titties and some nakedness and stuff like that when, strippers and porn stars came in. Why not, right? It's the internet. And of course, we were streaming this all live, and it was pure mayhem. And it was a lot of fun. So I think what I'm going to do here is, obviously, I'm going to move this into another episode to kind of get into a little bit more details about some of the bands that I had interviewed, and some of them that were good, some of them that were bad. But before we get out of here, I'm definitely going to talk a little bit about my friend Dave, because Dave was the one who single-handedly started bringing in traffic for us. Because what was happening was, and again, we were grassroots, man. We were doing this shit from the ground up, and however we had to do it, we were going to get people to fucking tune in. And now, we didn't have a chat even on our site. KNAC had a chat. We didn't. You had to instant message us, like, requests. And this is still before Napster. So, like, luckily, I had a fucking CD collection that was about 1,500 or 2,000 CDs. So we had a great catalog of music to get started with. As I'm kind of backing up a little bit, we had a studio that was built. We bought all the equipment to do all this shit. So, man, it was fucking intense, and it was fun. And then, again, back to Dave. So Dave had been a friend of mine that I had met when I was in Virginia. And so me and him had very similar musical tastes. And so when we launched, he was on. 6 a.m., boom, he was on that first day. And then as the days and weeks progressed, Dave's going to like knac.com and he's jumping in their chat room and he's telling everybody about our station. And then they're fucking blocking him and booting him out of the chat room. And Dave's like, fuck you guys. And he'd jump back in because at the time, you couldn't really block somebody because of the way the IP addresses were or how AOL was set up, some crazy shit. But Dave kept getting back in and he kept pushing. And every time he would push our website in that chat room, he'd get kicked out, but then we'd see somebody log in. We'd see somebody send us an instant message and, hey man, play this song. And if I had it, we'd play it. And we were doing shit right away. Like we didn't want people to be like, you know, give it the feel of a regular radio station where you got to wait fucking, you know, 2 hours, 3 hours to hear your song or even to get to hear your song at all. So, you know, it was trying to make things really quick. It was a station that was built by the listener, as we used to say, because we wanted everybody to get to hear the music that they fucking wanted. And so every day, man, Dave's doing this shit, or at least when he had time. So, you know, he was working really hard at the time, you know what I'm saying? So he's like, he's going into their chat room. He's doing all kinds of crazy shit online to get people, you know, over to us. And like I said, every time he did this, we'd slowly but surely get another one, 2, 3, 4. And we had people that came over from, you know, from KNAC who liked us more. Some people didn't. Some people went back to KNAC. But the way I looked at it was, I'm like, look, we're streaming to the fucking world. And I don't care that KNAC is also in Los Angeles. I don't care what their reputation was or anything. We were on a fucking even playing field at that point because we were on the internet and the world was literally at our fingertips at that point. And so, you know, I was meeting bands. I was going down to Hollywood. I was, you know, introducing myself to these bands. I'd bring these bands into the studio and they'd bring down their instruments. They'd play in the studio. They'd play their songs. We would, you know, drink beers. You know, some of them, you know, brought fucking pot and smoked marijuana, like the whole thing. It was unfucking believable what we were doing while we were doing this. And again, long before, we were definitely a few years ahead of ourselves in technology when this is all going on. Because again, people are logging into us trying to stream. You know, we're pushing out this high fucking signal coming out of our building. And, you know, these guys, everybody's logging in on these, you know, 56K modems and stuff like that. And there were definitely different segments that I did with some other friends. I had a sports segment with a friend of mine, my friend Ed, and he would come in and I'd call him on the phone and he'd give me a sports report. We had all kinds of crazy shit just to kind of build up our following. And again, it was a slow build at first and then boom, by the time 2 years into it, man, we had so much fucking 250,000 fucking visits were going on at that time. And we didn't know what the fuck to do with it. Like we were like, we've got all this traffic. What do we do? And so we'll get into a little bit more about what happened after those 2 years, how it, you know, kind of stopped playing music for a while, went into a music news site and things like that. So we'll get into a little bit more of this. I'll talk a bit more about some of the bands and some of the interviews that were done over these 2 years. We'll get into one of the crappy interviews that always pops into my head was David Draymond, Dennis DeYoung, both not the greatest interviews in the world. Pepper Keenan was phenomenal. Gary Hoey was great. Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains was another fucking, you know, awesome interview. Paul O'Neill was always a fantastic interview. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So it was a lot of fun. And I love to share these stories about MFNRocks.com because it was something that was fucking new and exciting to do, especially back in 1999. So like I said, we'll get more into the other shit and a little bit more into some other cool stories as we go into episode 15 next time. And like I said, hopefully we're going to be back on a little bit more of a regular basis. And as always, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, subscribe and leave your comments. Send me an email, whatever you need to do. And I'm happy to touch base on some other topics and subjects if you guys have some shit. Totally cool, man. Until then, we'll catch you next time. Cheers. I'm still waiting for my Jack Daniels sponsorship because I do got to tell you, that Gentleman Jack tonight was fucking fantastic.
Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. You dig?
God bless the internet.